A single dad thought his boss's wife was just being friendly. Then she slipped a note into his hand and whispered 5 words that would change everything. Your boss can never know. Picture this. You're standing in a glass lobby 38 floors above Charlotte, North Carolina. Your shirt still smells like your daughter's breakfast. In your pocket, a piece of paper burns against your skin like a confession you haven't made yet. Your boss is walking toward you with that smile successful men wear when they've never had to choose between what's right and what they want. Your phone buzzes, school nurse. Your daughter needs you. But the note in your pocket needs an answer too. How did a good man, a devoted father who color codes his calendar and keeps emergency snacks in his desk drawer, end up here? How does friendship with your boss's lonely wife turn into a folded phone number and a warning that sounds like a promise? This is the story of a choice between following the rules and following your heart, and why doing the right thing sometimes means breaking everything first. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. Let's dive in. But let me take you back to where this really started. 6 months before that lobby confrontation. Before the note. Before the choice that would split one life into before and after. 6 months earlier. Caleb Reed's alarm went off at 5:30 in the morning, like it did every weekday, and he slapped it silent before it could wake Mia through the thin apartment walls. The bedroom was still dark. Charlotte's pre-dawn glow barely touching the edges of his blinds. He sat on the edge of his bed for exactly 30 seconds, the same 30 seconds he gave himself every morning to remember he was doing this alone and that was okay. Then he stood up. The apartment was small. Not charmingly small. Just small. 800 square feet that used to hold 3 people back when Emma still lived here, back when marriage was something he believed would last. Now it was just him and Mia, and most days that felt like exactly enough until it didn't. The medicine cabinet in the bathroom told the real story of single fatherhood. Children's Tylenol in 2 flavors because Mia decided she hated grape last month. Asthma inhaler tucked behind adult deodorant. Gummy vitamins shaped like dinosaurs lined up like tiny prehistoric soldiers. Band-Aids with cartoon characters he didn't recognize but Mia insisted were essential. The cabinet door didn't close all the way anymore because the hinge was loose and he kept meaning to fix it and kept forgetting. He brushed his teeth and avoided looking too hard at the dark circles under his eyes. 3 hours of sleep. Maybe 4. Mia had a nightmare around 2 in the morning, something about a dragon made of homework, and he'd sat on the edge of her bed rubbing her back until she drifted off again. Then he'd lain awake staring at his ceiling, wondering if other fathers felt this tired, or if he was just bad at this. The kitchen was worse. Mia's backpack on the floor where she'd dropped it yesterday, permission slip for the field trip still unsigned on the counter. Dishes in the sink because he'd chosen reading her an extra bedtime story over cleaning up. The refrigerator hummed too loud, and the calendar stuck to it with alphabet magnets showed his life in 2 colors. Blue for Dad. Days when he had Mia. Red for school days when she was at aftercare until he could leave work. There were no other colors. No space for anything else. He made her lunch while the coffee brewed. Peanut butter and jelly because it was Tuesday, and on Tuesdays she accepted nothing else. Apple slices that he hoped she'd eat and knew she'd trade. String cheese. The good cookies, not the store brand, because he'd learned that some things mattered to 7-year-olds in ways that defied logic. He wrote a note on her napkin with a smiley face and tucked it in. She never mentioned these notes, but he found them sometimes saved in her desk drawer at home, flattened out like they meant something. Mia shuffled into the kitchen at 6:15 wearing mismatched socks and a nightgown with the stain he'd given up trying to remove. Her hair stuck up on one side. She looked at the cereal he'd put out and wrinkled her nose. I want waffles. We don't have time for waffles. You never have time. The accusation landed in his chest like it always did. He knelt down so they were eye level, something the parenting book said to do, something that made him feel like he was constantly apologizing for the life he'd given her. Saturday, he said. Saturday morning, I'll make waffles, and we'll eat them on the couch and watch cartoons until noon. Deal. Can we have chocolate chips? Don't push your luck. She grinned and ate the cereal. Crisis averted. Small victory. He'd take it. The morning blurred into routine. Brushing teeth. Finding the homework. Arguing about whether a sweater was necessary because, yes, Mia, it's 60 degrees and that's cold. Backpack. Lunchbox. Jacket she didn't want, but he made her bring anyway. They left the apartment at 7:10 because school started at 7:45 and the drive was 30 minutes when traffic cooperated, which it never did. In the car, Mia sang along to the radio off-key and unself-conscious, and Caleb felt the familiar ache of loving someone so much it physically hurt. She was all Emma's coloring, dark hair, and darker eyes, but she had his stubborn chin and his tendency to ask questions that didn't have easy answers. Like last week, when she'd asked why Mommy left, and he'd had to explain that sometimes people stop fitting together without it being anyone's fault. She'd accepted this with a 7-year-old's resilience that he both envied and mourned. Emma sent birthday cards, Christmas presents that arrived exactly on time. She'd moved to Denver for work, or maybe for the man she'd started seeing 6 months before she asked for the divorce. Caleb had never been sure and had stopped asking. She was a good person who'd been a mediocre wife and an inconsistent mother, and he'd stopped hating her for it somewhere around year 2 of doing this alone. Now he just felt tired when he thought about her. Tired and relieved, and sometimes late at night grateful she'd been honest enough to leave instead of staying and resenting them both. He dropped Mia at school and she ran toward the building without looking back. He waited until she was inside. He always waited. Then he drove to Blue Ridge Capital and found parking 4 blocks away because the garage was too expensive, and walked in wind that cut through his jacket. The office was glass and steel and optimism, 38 floors of people who believed in markets and models and the idea that numbers told clean stories. Caleb took the elevator to 15, where the financial analysts lived in cubicles that almost had windows. His desk was organized chaos. 2 monitors, coffee mug from a conference 3 years ago. Framed photo of Mia from last Halloween when she'd been a dragon and terrorized the neighborhood with impressive commitment. Drawer full of granola bars and crackers because sometimes lunch didn't happen. He was good at this job, better than good. He caught errors that would have cost the company millions. He built models that predicted market shifts with uncomfortable accuracy. He understood that numbers had patterns, and patterns had meanings, and if you paid attention, really paid attention, the numbers told you everything you needed to know. They didn't lie. They didn't change their minds. They didn't wake up one day and decide they wanted different things. People were messier. His boss, Wesley Hart, was the kind of man who wore success like a well-tailored suit. Expensive watch, perfect teeth, handshake that communicated confidence without aggression. He'd hired Caleb 4 years ago and treated him well. Bonuses arrived on time. Recognition came in meetings. Once, when Mia had pneumonia and Caleb missed a week of work, Wesley had sent flowers to the apartment with a card that said, "Family first." It had felt genuine. Maybe it was. Wesley ran the acquisitions division with the precision of a Swiss watch. He collected companies the way some people collected art, always looking for value others missed. He golfed with executives and closed deals over scotch and remembered everyone's names. He was good at his job the way Caleb was good at his, which created a kind of mutual respect that felt almost like friendship until you remembered the power differential. They weren't friends. They were boss and employee who got along well. Caleb knew this. But sometimes in meetings when Wesley asked his opinion and actually listened, he forgot. Tuesday morning, 3 weeks into April. Caleb was running late. Mia had spilled cough syrup on his shirt while he was trying to give her the correct dose, and he'd had to change and traffic had been worse than usual, and he'd run through the lobby and jab the elevator button like it would make the car arrive faster. He made it to his desk by 8:40, only 10 minutes late tie, crooked and heart racing. His coworker Jordan looked up from the cubicle next to his and grinned. Rough morning. Every morning's rough, this one just showed it more. Jordan Pike had been his work friend for 5 years, the kind of friend you got lunch with and complained about deadlines to, but never quite saw outside the office. He was good people. Divorced, no kids, still believed in blind dates and lottery tickets. He kept a plant on his desk that was somehow still alive despite his best neglect. "Wesley wants to see you," Jordan said, "called down 20 minutes ago." Caleb's stomach dropped. Late to work and summoned to the boss's office was not a winning combination. He straightened his tie, grabbed his tablet, and took the stairs to 18 because waiting for the elevator would give him too much time to panic. Wesley's office had a view. Actual windows. A couch that probably cost more than Caleb's car. Bookshelves with leather-bound volumes that looked red, which was rarer than you'd think. Wesley sat behind his desk working through emails with the focus of a man who never questioned whether he was using his time correctly. Caleb knocked on the open door. "You wanted to see me." Wesley looked up and smiled. "Caleb, come in, sit." The couch, or the chair, felt like a test Caleb didn't understand. He chose the chair across from Wesley's desk. Professional. Safe. "Relax," Wesley said. "You look like I'm about to fire you." "Are you?" "Not today." Caleb managed a laugh that sounded almost natural. "What can I do for you?" Wesley leaned back, that easy posture of men who'd never had to worry about rent. "I wanted to introduce you to someone. She's been asking about the team, and I thought it might be good for her to see what we actually do here. Make the office feel less abstract." She. Wife Caleb's brain supplied. He'd never met Wesley's wife. Knew she existed the way you know executives have families mentioned in passing visible in the framed photo on Wesley's desk. Blonde, beautiful. Smiling, that smile people wore for professional photography. "Sure," Caleb said, happy to. Wesley stood and walked to the office door, opened it wider, and gestured to someone in the hallway. The someone who walked in changed everything, though Caleb wouldn't understand that for weeks. Lillian Hart was beautiful the way a painting was beautiful. Something you noticed immediately and kept noticing in different ways. Blonde hair that fell past her shoulders, simple and unstyled in a way that suggested she didn't need to try. Blue eyes that actually looked at you instead of past you. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably had a designer label somewhere but didn't scream it. Elegant, understated, expensive in a way that whispered instead of shouted. But it was her expression that caught him. She looked uncertain. Nervous almost. Like she wasn't sure she should be here. "Lillian, this is Caleb Reed," Wesley said. "Best analyst on my team. Keeps us honest." She stepped forward and extended her hand. Caleb stood and shook it. Her palm was warm. The handshake lasted 1 beat, then 2. Then she pulled back, but her eyes stayed on his face for just a moment longer than strangers' eyes usually did. "Wesley says you're the one who keeps the numbers honest," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. Well-educated. The kind of voice that came from good schools and better breeding. Caleb defaulted to humor because that's what he did when he didn't know what else to do. "I try. The numbers don't lie. People do." Lillian laughed. Really laughed, not the polite chuckle of someone being introduced to their husband's employee. It was genuine, unguarded, and for a second she looked younger. Less careful. Wesley glanced at her like he'd forgotten she could make that sound. The moment stretched and snapped. Wesley was already talking about quarterly projections, the Henderson acquisition market volatility. Lillian listened with the attentive expression of someone who'd learned to look interested in things that bored her. Caleb found himself watching her instead of Wesley, which was unprofessional and strange. She caught him looking. Smiled slightly, he looked away. The meeting lasted 20 minutes and contained nothing memorable, except the fact that she'd been there. Wesley walked them both to the elevator, hand on Lillian's lower back in that proprietary way of married men. She didn't lean into the touch. Caleb noticed, wished he hadn't. In the elevator going down alone, Caleb wondered why he felt like he'd just failed a test he didn't know he was taking. The week continued. Emails and meetings and calls with clients who wanted reassurance the market wouldn't eat them alive. Caleb picked Mia up from aftercare and made dinner and helped with homework and read stories and collapsed into bed and did it again. Thursday bled into Friday, and he'd almost forgotten about Lillian Hart until Wesley appeared at his cubicle at 4 in the afternoon. Got a minute. Caleb minimized the spreadsheet he'd been building. Always. Wesley perched on the edge of the desk, casual the way he did when he wanted something but didn't want it to feel like a demand. Listen, Lillian mentioned she really enjoyed meeting you. We're having some people over for dinner tomorrow night. Nothing formal, just good food and conversation. I'd love for you to come. Bring your daughter. Caleb's first instinct was to refuse. He didn't do boss dinners, didn't mix work and personal life, didn't have the energy for small talk with people who'd never had to choose between fixing the car and buying Mia new shoes. But Wesley was looking at him with genuine warmth. And something else. Loneliness, maybe. The kind that came from having everything except people who knew you as more than your title. What time, Caleb heard himself ask. 7. Casual dress. My address is in the company directory. Wesley stood, clapped him on the shoulder. It'll be fun. Lillian's excited to have a kid in the house. We don't get that often. After Wesley left, Jordan rolled his chair over to Caleb's cubicle with an expression that said he'd heard everything. You just got invited to the Hart House. That's either very good or very dangerous. It's dinner, Caleb said. Nothing with Wesley is just anything. Jordan lowered his voice. Be careful. You're good at your job, but you're not irreplaceable. None of us are. It's dinner with my boss and his wife. What could possibly go wrong? Jordan gave him a look that suggested Jordan was smarter than both of them. Everything. Everything could go wrong. That night, after Mia was asleep, Caleb stood in his small kitchen and wondered why he'd said yes. The smart play was to call Wesley Monday morning and make an excuse, prior commitment. Mia not feeling well. Literally anything. But he thought about Lillian's laugh. The way she'd looked uncertain, walking into that office like she needed permission to exist in her husband's space. The way her eyes had held his for just a moment too long, and in that moment he'd seen something familiar. Someone who knew what loneliness tasted like. He didn't call Monday to cancel. He told himself it was because backing out would be rude. Professional suicide, maybe. He didn't examine the real reason too closely. Saturday arrived with the kind of spring weather Charlotte did best. Warm, but not hot. Mia spent the morning asking what fancy people ate for dinner and whether she had to wear a dress. Caleb spent it trying to remember the last time he'd been to someone's home for a meal that wasn't pizza with Jordan. He dressed Mia in the nice outfit Emma had sent for her birthday. Dark blue dress with white flowers. Tights that Mia hated but wore without complaining when he explained they were going somewhere special. He put on slacks and a button-down shirt that still had the crease from being folded in his closet too long. They looked almost normal, almost like people who did this kind of thing regularly. The drive to the Blue Ridge neighborhood took 30 minutes and felt like crossing into another country. The houses got bigger, the lawns got wider, the silence got more expensive. Wesley's address led them to a circular driveway in front of a house that made Mia whisper, "Holy cow," in a way that made Caleb's chest hurt. This was a mistake. They didn't belong here. But Mia was already unbuckling her seatbelt, eyes wide, and Caleb couldn't crush that excitement. Before he could knock, the front door opened, and Lillian stood there barefoot in jeans and a soft gray sweater that probably cost more than his rent, but looked comfortable. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, no makeup that he could see. She looked more real than she had in Wesley's office, more like a person and less like a photograph. When she saw Mia, her whole face changed, softened, lit up in a way that looked unpracticed. "You must be Mia," she said, kneeling down to eye level. "I've heard so much about you." Mia, being 7 and brutally honest, delivered the line that would define the evening. "This house is too big. How do you even find the bathroom?" Lillian laughed that real laugh again, and Caleb watched something unguarded flash across her face before she caught it. "I got lost my first week. Come on, I'll give you the tour so you don't end up wandering forever." She took Mia's hand and led her inside, and Caleb stood on the porch for a moment, watching his daughter disappear into a house that cost more than he'd make in a lifetime, holding the hand of a woman he'd met once and couldn't stop thinking about. This was definitely a mistake, but he followed them in anyway. The Hart House was a museum where 2 people happened to sleep. That was Caleb's first thought, walking through rooms that felt staged rather than lived in. Everything matched. Everything coordinated. The couch pillows aligned at perfect angles. The coffee table books arranged by color. Fresh flowers in crystal vases that looked like they'd been placed by someone who understood feng shui and interior design magazines. Mia's hand squeezed his as they followed Lillian through the foyer with its chandelier that probably cost more than his car. His daughter's eyes were wide, taking in the marble floors and the curved staircase and the art on the walls that looked important in that specific way expensive art always did. Original, probably. Caleb knew nothing about art except that he couldn't afford it. Lillian walked them through like a tour guide, showing off someone else's property. "This is the living room where we never actually live. This is the dining room where we eat maybe twice a month. This is the kitchen that a designer spent 6 months perfecting, and I still can't find the right pan when I need it." She said it lightly like a joke, but Caleb heard something else underneath. An apology, maybe. Or an explanation for why all this square footage felt emptier than his 800-square-foot apartment ever had. "Where's Mr. Wesley?" Mia asked. "Backyard," Lillian said. "Grilling. He takes it very seriously. There are thermometers involved. For cooking. 3 different kinds." Mia looked at Caleb with an expression that suggested she thought rich people were weird, and Caleb had to work hard not to laugh. The tour continued upstairs. Guest bedrooms that had never hosted guests. A library with built-in shelves, floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound books that looked like they'd been purchased by the yard. An office with a view of the city that made Caleb's cubicle feel like a closet. And at the end of the hall, a room that made Lillian pause before opening the door. "This was supposed to be a nursery," she said quietly. The room was empty, except for a window seat with cushions and one painting on the wall. A woman looking out a window at a garden. The same painting Caleb would see her standing in front of months later at the museum, though he didn't know that yet. "It's pretty," Mia said, walking to the window. "You can see everything from here." Lillian stood in the doorway like she couldn't quite bring herself to enter. "Yes, you can. Are you going to put a baby in here?" The question hit like a fist. Caleb started to tell Mia that was rude, that you don't ask adults about their family planning, but Lillian just smiled sadly. "I wanted to," she said. "But sometimes things don't work out the way we plan." Mia accepted this with the easy resilience of children who hadn't yet learned that some disappointments carved permanent spaces inside you. "Okay, can we see the backyard now?" The yard was massive. Not a yard, really. Grounds. Professionally landscaped with sections that flowed into each other like rooms. A rose garden near the house. A stone path leading to what looked like a small pond. Trees positioned for maximum aesthetic impact. And in the center of the patio, Wesley stood over a grill that looked like it cost more than a semester of Mia's college fund would one day need. "Caleb," Wesley called out, waving a spatula. Perfect timing. "Beer's in the cooler. Help yourself." The cooler held imported craft beers that Caleb had never heard of. He grabbed one that looked least intimidating and twisted off the cap while Mia ran toward the pond with the fearlessness of 7-year-olds who hadn't yet learned that expensive things required careful behavior. "Beautiful night," Wesley said, flipping steaks with the precision of a surgeon. He wore khakis and a polo shirt and looked relaxed in a way he never did at the office. "Market's been good to us this quarter." "Very good," Caleb agreed, because that seemed safe. "You've been a big part of that. The Henley acquisition wouldn't have closed without your analysis. I hope you know I see that. I appreciate it." Wesley checked a thermometer, made a small adjustment to the heat, and took a long drink from his own beer. "Can I ask you something personal?" Caleb's guard went up immediately. "Sure. How do you do it?" "The single dad thing. I watch you juggling calls and pickups, and I can't figure out how you make it work." "Badly," Caleb said. "I make it work badly and hope Mia doesn't notice all the ways I'm failing. She seems like a great kid. She is, despite me." Wesley laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Lillian wants kids." "Wanted?" "I don't know. We've been trying for years. Nothing takes. Doctors say there's no medical reason. Just one of those things." "I'm sorry," Caleb said, because what else was there to say? "I think I'd be terrible at it anyway." Wesley flipped another steak. "I can manage a company, but I can't imagine managing a tiny human who doesn't respond to logical incentives. They're not as illogical as you'd think. Just differently logical." From across the yard, Mia's voice carried back. Lillian had joined her by the pond, and they were crouched down looking at something in the water. Koi fish, probably. Lillian was pointing, explaining something, and Mia was leaning in close like whatever Lillian was saying was the most fascinating thing she'd ever heard. "Lillian's good with her," Wesley observed. "She's good with people." Wesley made a sound that might have been agreement. "Sometimes I think I married a painting. Beautiful to look at. Perfect in every way. But you can't really talk to a painting. It just hangs there looking expensive." The confession landed heavy in the evening air. Caleb didn't know what to do with it. "That's a terrible thing to say," he finally offered. "Terrible, but true." Wesley's smile was sad. "Don't get me wrong. I love her. I just don't think I know her. 8 years of marriage, and I couldn't tell you her favorite movie or what she thinks about when she's quiet. I know she looks good at fundraisers. I know she says the right things to clients. Beyond that," he shrugged. "Maybe you should ask her. Maybe I should." The steaks finished. Wesley plated them with the same precision he brought to quarterly reports. Perfectly seared, properly rested, temperature checked and rechecked. They carried the food inside to a dining room table that could seat 12, but tonight held 4. Dinner was surf and turf that tasted expensive, lobster tail and filet mignon, and sides that had clearly been catered because nobody accidentally made potatoes that looked like art. Wesley dominated the conversation the way he dominated meetings talking about market trends and the new development downtown and his golf game. Lillian managed the meal, refilling water glasses and offering seconds and saying very little, but Caleb watched her watch Mia. The way Lillian's expression changed when his daughter launched into a rambling story about her best friend Sophie's pet hamster who'd escaped and lived in the classroom walls for 3 days eating stolen crackers. The way Lillian leaned forward asking questions genuinely invested in the drama of second-grade rodent rescue operations. "And how did you finally catch him?" Lillian asked. Sophie put a trail of goldfish crackers leading to a box, Mia explained with the gravity of someone describing a military operation. Mr. Whiskers couldn't resist. "Hamsters are not smart about snacks." Lillian laughed, and it was that real laugh again, the one that seemed to surprise even her. Wesley checked his phone twice during the story, responding to emails that apparently couldn't wait until Monday. After dinner, Mia asked if she could see the backyard again. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and orange, and lightning bugs had started their evening dance above the perfectly manicured grass. "Of course," Lillian said, standing immediately. "Let's go catch fireflies." She said it to Mia, but she looked at Caleb, and something in that look felt like an invitation he shouldn't accept, but couldn't refuse. Wesley waved them off. "I'll clean up. You guys enjoy." The evening air was warm and smelled like roses from the garden beds. Mia ran ahead chasing light that blinked in and out of existence, her laughter carrying back across the lawn. Caleb and Lillian followed more slowly, maintaining that careful distance of people who weren't sure what the rules were. "She's wonderful," Lillian said softly. "You should be proud." "I'm terrified I'm ruining her." "You're not." "How do you know?" "Because she laughs like that. Like she's not afraid of anything. Kids who are being ruined don't laugh like that." They walked in silence for a moment. Mia had found a toad and was trying to have a conversation with it, explaining the proper way to catch bugs if the toad was interested in learning. "I always wanted this," Lillian said. "Not the house. This. The sound of a kid playing. Bedtime stories. School projects on the refrigerator. The chaos. And Wesley." Lillian's smile was thin. "He wants legacy. Board positions his children might inherit. Heirs for the family name. He doesn't want sticky fingers on his car interior or Lego pieces hidden in the couch cushions." "Have you told him that?" "Told him what?" "That I want mess instead of perfection. That I'd trade this entire house for one afternoon that feels real." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. He wouldn't understand. "Wesley optimizes. He doesn't want something as inefficient as a toddler's tantrum. So why stay?" She turned to look at him fully, and the setting sun caught her face just right, and Caleb understood why Wesley had called her a painting. But paintings didn't have that much sadness in their eyes. "Where would I go? I was 23 when we married. My father had medical debt from cancer treatment. Wesley paid it off, wrote a check like it was nothing. Then he took me to dinner and asked me to marry him, and I said yes, because I was grateful and young and stupid enough to think gratitude was the same as love." "That's not stupid." "It's not smart." Mia called out that she'd found a second toad and declared them best friends. Lillian waved at her, smiled, then let the smile fall when she turned back to Caleb. "Can I tell you something terrible?" Her voice was barely a whisper. They were standing close now, closer than they'd been all evening, and Caleb could smell her perfume. Something light and floral that probably had a French name he couldn't pronounce. "Depends," he said. "Illegal or just morally messy? Maybe both." She looked at him, and her eyes were asking a question he didn't want to answer because answering meant acknowledging something dangerous hovering in the space between them. He should step back. Should call for Mia. Should thank them for dinner and leave before this moment became something neither of them could take back. But he didn't move. "I feel like I'm dying," Lillian said. "Every day I wake up in that perfect bedroom and put on expensive clothes and have breakfast in a kitchen designed by someone who won a James Beard Award, and I feel like I'm disappearing. Like I'm becoming the idea of a person instead of an actual person. And then you walked into Wesley's office and looked at me like I was real." "Lillian, don't. Just let me say this. When you shook my hand, you held on for 2 seconds too long. And in those 2 seconds, I felt more seen than I have in 8 years of marriage. That's pathetic, isn't it?" "It's honest." She was crying now, silent tears that caught the last of the daylight. Caleb wanted to wipe them away, wanted to pull her close and tell her she wasn't disappearing, that he saw her, really saw her. Instead, he stood perfectly still and let the moment stretch until it hurt. "Daddy, look." Mia's voice shattered the spell. "The toads are jumping." They turned toward his daughter, who was laughing as 2 toads hopped in opposite directions, ruining her plan for toad friendship. Lillian wiped her eyes quickly, and when she turned back, her composure had clicked into place like armor. "Sorry," she said. "That was inappropriate." "No, it was real." She smiled sadly. "Real doesn't pay the bills." They walked back to where Mia was now looking for a third toad to mediate the toad divorce, as she explained it. The evening had shifted into that blue hour between day and night when everything looks like a memory even while it's happening. Wesley appeared on the patio, waving them back inside for dessert. The rest of the evening blurred. Coffee and some elaborate cake that tasted like effort. Mia falling asleep on the couch completely worn out from running and toads and rich people's food. Wesley talking about wanting to do this again soon, about how nice it was to have life in the house. Lillian carried Mia's shoes while Caleb carried his sleeping daughter to the car. At the door, goodbyes happened with the awkward formality of people pretending the evening had been normal. Wesley shook his hand. "Thanks for coming. Really, this was good. Thank you for having us." Then Lillian stepped forward, and Caleb shifted Mia's weight to one arm so he could accept what he thought would be a handshake. Instead, Lillian hugged him professional and brief, the kind of hug that happened at the end of dinner parties. Except when she pulled back, she pressed something into his palm. A small square of paper folded tight. Her eyes met his for just a fraction of a second, and in that fraction he saw everything. Hope. Fear. Desperation. A question he didn't have an answer to. "Drive safe," she said, and stepped back. In the car, Mia woke up just enough to murmur about the toads and how fancy people had too many forks. Caleb drove home on autopilot, the piece of paper in his palm feeling like it weighed more than his daughter asleep in the back seat. He didn't open it until they were home, until Mia was in bed, still in her dress because she'd been too tired to change, until he was sitting on his couch in the dark apartment with just the streetlight coming through the blinds. The paper unfolded into neat handwriting, a phone number, and below it 3 words that changed everything. He can never know. Caleb sat there for a long time, staring at 10 digits and 3 words. He should throw it away, should pretend it never happened, should recognize this for what it was, a married woman asking him to be part of something that would destroy lives. Instead, he put it in his wallet behind the photo of Mia and told himself he'd deal with it tomorrow. He didn't sleep that night. Just lay in bed staring at his ceiling, thinking about sad eyes and real laughter, and the way Lillian had looked at his daughter like Mia was the answer to a prayer nobody was listening to. Tomorrow came, and the note was still there. Still burning like evidence of a crime he hadn't committed yet. He went to work, did his job, picked up Mia, made dinner, read stories. The routine held, but underneath it the note waited. 1 week passed. Then 2. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't do anything except carry that piece of paper around like a talisman, or a curse, he wasn't sure which. But he didn't throw it away either, and that he would later understand was when he made his choice. Not calling was still a choice. Keeping the number was an answer to the question her eyes had asked. He just didn't know it yet. The note lived in Caleb's wallet for 2 weeks, and became the thing he was most aware of at all times. Sitting in meetings, he could feel it pressed against his thigh through the fabric of his pants. Standing at his desk, he'd touch his back pocket unconsciously, confirming it was still there like a smoker checking for cigarettes. At night, taking off his pants before bed, he'd see his wallet on the dresser and know exactly what it contained and exactly why he hadn't thrown it away. He told himself stories to justify the keeping. It would be rude to throw away something someone gave you. He needed to find the right moment to dispose of it properly. He'd get around to it eventually. All lies he didn't quite believe but found useful anyway. The truth was simpler and more damning. He kept the note because throwing it away felt like slamming a door on possibility. Not the possibility of an affair, he told himself. Just the possibility of connection with someone who understood what loneliness tasted like at 3 a.m, when everyone else was asleep and you were awake wondering if this was all there was. He didn't call. That counted for something. He went to work and did his job and picked up Mia and made dinner and helped with homework and read bedtime stories. The routine held. Everything looked normal from the outside. Then Lillian started showing up at the office. The first time was innocent enough. Tuesday afternoon, Caleb was deep in spreadsheets when Jordan rolled his chair over and whistled low. Boss's wife alert. Caleb looked up, and there she was stepping off the elevator onto the 15th floor, looking like she'd gotten lost on the way to somewhere more important. She wore a navy dress and heels, and carried a leather bag that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her hair was pulled back, and she had sunglasses pushed up on her head even though they were inside. "She's bringing Wesley lunch," Jordan said. "Saw the bag from that place downtown, the one where a sandwich costs $20. Caleb turned back to his monitor like he wasn't tracking her movement through his peripheral vision, like he couldn't feel the exact moment she walked past his cubicle on the way to the elevator that would take her to 18. She didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge him. But something in the air changed when she passed, and he knew she was as aware of him as he was of her. She was gone 15 minutes later. Caleb watched the elevator numbers descend and told himself he felt relieved. The second time was Thursday. Charity gala planning meeting that Wesley had mentioned in passing. The acquisitions division was sponsoring a table and someone needed to coordinate with the event planner. Lillian had volunteered. She sat in the conference room with Wesley and 3 other executives taking notes on seating arrangements and auction items and whether the centerpieces should be roses or orchids. Caleb had no reason to be there, but Jordan was presenting something about donor outreach, and Caleb had tagged along because the alternative was staring at his computer pretending to work. Lillian wore a cream sweater and jeans, casual, almost like the woman who'd chased fireflies with Mia, but her hands were clasped too tight in her lap and she laughed at Wesley's jokes with perfect timing, and Caleb could see the performance of it. The careful construction of appropriate wife behavior. Their eyes met once across the conference table, just once. She looked away first, but not before he saw something flash across her face. Recognition, regret, relief. He couldn't tell. After the meeting, she left with Wesley, his hand on her lower back, guiding her toward the elevator. She didn't look back. The third time was the following Monday, and it wasn't innocent at all. Caleb was alone in his cubicle, everyone else at lunch when she appeared. No warning, no sound of approaching heels. Just suddenly, there standing at the entrance to his small workspace with a manila folder in her hands. "I have contracts for Wesley," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. "They need your review before he signs. We don't handle contracts on this floor. Legal's on 22. "I know." The air between them felt thick. Caleb stood because sitting while she was standing felt wrong. The cubicle was small, 3 feet between them at most. He could smell her perfume, the same scent from the dinner, from the garden, from the moment before everything got complicated. "You could have emailed those," he said. "I could have. Why didn't you?" "Because I wanted to see if you were real, if I'd imagined that whole night." "You didn't imagine it." She set the folder on his desk, a gesture that felt like an excuse to stay longer. Her hands were shaking slightly. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about what I said, about how pathetic it sounded." "It didn't sound pathetic. I told a man I barely know that my marriage is empty and I feel like I'm disappearing. That's the definition of pathetic. It's the definition of honest." Lillian looked at him and her careful composure cracked. "Why didn't you call?" The question landed between them like a confession. Caleb gripped the edge of his desk because if he didn't hold on to something, he might reach for her. "Because you're married. Because I have a daughter who thinks I'm a good person. Because calling that number turned something that hasn't happened yet into something that did. What if I want it to happen?" "Don't." His voice came out rougher than he meant. "Don't say that." "Why not?" "It's true. I gave you my number. I wrote those words. He can never know. I meant them. I meant all of it." "You don't know what you're asking. I'm asking you to see me. Really see me. Not as Wesley's wife or some perfect idea of what a woman should be. Just me, Lillian. The person who feels like she's drowning in a life that looks perfect from the outside." She was crying now. Silent tears that she didn't bother wiping away. Caleb wanted to pull her into his arms, wanted to tell her he saw her, had seen her from that first handshake, couldn't stop seeing her. Instead, he moved the chair between them like a barricade. "I can't be this person," he said quietly. "The one who wrecks marriages, who becomes the reason some kids' parents got divorced. I can't be that guy. Even if the marriage is already wrecked, that's not for me to decide. Then who decides Wesley, the man who treats me like furniture that happens to look good at fundraisers? She laughed bitterly. I've been deciding to die quietly in that house for 8 years. Maybe it's time I decided something else. Then leave him. File for divorce. Move out. But don't ask me to be your reason. Don't make me the thing you're running toward, because that's not fair to either of us. What if you're not the reason? What if you're just the person who made me realize I deserve more? Caleb didn't have an answer for that. They stood there in his tiny cubicle, 3 feet and 1,000 consequences between them, and the silence stretched until it hurt. Then Lillian did something that changed everything. She stepped forward, closing the distance, and reached up to touch his face. Her palm was warm against his cheek. Her eyes were searching his for something he wasn't sure he could give. "I'm dying in that perfect house," she whispered. "Every day a little more. And then I met you and Mia, and for the first time in years I felt alive. Don't tell me that doesn't mean anything. It means everything. That's the problem." He was going to kiss her. He could feel it happening, the inevitable pull of gravity, or stupidity, or loneliness that looked like connection. His hand came up to cover hers against his face. She leaned in. He didn't pull back. The door handle turned. They sprang apart like teenagers caught in a closet. Lillian grabbed the folder off the desk. Caleb sat down fast and opened a random file on his computer. The door to the cubicle area opened, and Wesley walked in, cheerful and oblivious, talking before he fully entered. "There you are. I thought you got lost. Found what you needed." Lillian's voice was steady when she answered. "Yes." Caleb confirmed, "These are ready for your signature." Wesley barely glanced at Caleb. "Great. Ready for lunch?" "Absolutely." Wesley put his hand on her back and guided her toward the door. She didn't look at Caleb, didn't acknowledge him at all, just walked out like the last 10 minutes hadn't happened, like her hand hadn't been on his face and his heart wasn't still hammering against his ribs. After they left, Caleb sat in his cubicle and tried to remember how to breathe. That was close. Too close. If Wesley had walked in 30 seconds later, he would have found his wife kissing his employee, and that would have been the end of everything. Jordan appeared in the doorway 5 minutes later with 2 sandwiches and a look that said he knew exactly what kind of close call had just happened. "You want to tell me what that was about?" "Nothing. She brought contracts." "Brother, I've known you 5 years. That wasn't nothing." Jordan set a sandwich on Caleb's desk and sat in the spare chair. "That was something that's going to blow up your life if you're not careful." "I'm being careful." "Careful people don't stand that close to their boss's wife. Careful people don't look at married women like they're the answer to questions they haven't asked yet." "I'm not doing anything. Not doing anything yet." Jordan unwrapped his sandwich. "Look, I get it. She's beautiful. She seems lonely. You're lonely. Tale as old as time. But you've got Mia to think about, and a job you need, and a boss who signs your paychecks and could destroy your career with one phone call. I know all that. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you look like a man who's about to make a really stupid decision and call it fate." Caleb didn't argue because Jordan was right and they both knew it. He ate his sandwich and went back to work and tried to focus on numbers that made sense instead of feelings that didn't. But that night after Mia was asleep, he took out his phone and stared at the number he'd memorized without meaning to. His thumb hovered over the screen. One text. That's all it would take. One message to open a door he'd been pretending he wanted to keep closed. "We need to talk somewhere safe." He hit send before he could change his mind. Her response came immediately, like she'd been waiting. "Tomorrow. Art Museum, back gallery, 2 p.m. Caleb stared at the message. This was the cliff edge, the point of no return. He could still say no, could claim a work emergency or remember a parent-teacher conference or just not show up. She'd understand. They could both pretend this had been a moment of weakness they'd overcome. "Okay," he typed. The next 24 hours felt like walking through water. Everything took too much effort. Breathing, speaking, pretending to care about quarterly projections when all he could think about was 2 p.m. and a museum and what happened when you stopped fighting against something that felt inevitable. He told Jordan he had a doctor's appointment. Told his calendar he was out for a personal matter. At 1:30, he left the office and drove across town to the Mint Museum, hands gripping the steering wheel too tight, heart beating too fast. The museum was quiet on a Tuesday afternoon. Tourists mostly. A few art students sketching in notebooks. Caleb bought a ticket he didn't need and wandered through galleries without seeing anything. Abstract paintings, sculptures, pottery, all of it meaningless compared to what he was about to do. He found her in the back gallery, standing in front of a painting he recognized from the empty nursery in her house. A woman looking out a window at a garden just out of reach. She didn't turn around when he approached. Just spoke to the painting like it might answer back. She looks like she's waiting to be chosen. Or waiting to leave, Caleb said, echoing what he'd said before that first time. Lillian turned to face him. She wore jeans and a plain white t-shirt and no makeup and looked more real than he'd ever seen her. More fragile, too. Like the wrong word might shatter her. "Thank you for coming." "I almost didn't, but you did." They sat on the bench in front of the painting. Neither spoke for a long moment. Around them, the museum hummed with quiet conversations and careful footsteps. A world going on like nothing mattered when everything did. "Tell me about your father," Caleb said finally. "The gallery." Lillian's expression softened. He loved art the way some people love religion. Believed it could save you if you let it. He had a small gallery in Davidson. Nothing fancy. Just good art and honest conversations with people who actually looked at the paintings instead of buying them to match their furniture. What happened? Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4 by the time they found it. The medical bills came faster than the insurance could cover. He was drowning in debt and couldn't work, and the gallery was failing, and I was 23 and terrified. And Wesley bought a painting. Wesley bought 12 paintings. Overpaid for all of them. Then he kept coming back. Charming, successful, talking about investment opportunities and portfolio diversification and making it all sound like he was doing my father a favor. Which he was. The money saved the gallery. Saved my father's life, maybe. Bought him another 2 years. "So you married him out of gratitude." "I married him because I was young and stupid and didn't understand that gratitude makes a terrible foundation for a marriage." She laughed bitterly. "He proposed 3 months after my father went into remission. Took me to an expensive restaurant and had the ring and the dessert like a scene from a movie. I said yes, because how do you say no to the man who saved your father's life? You say no if you don't love him. I thought I could learn to love him. Thought love was something you built over time, like equity in a house. But 8 years later, I'm still waiting to feel it, and he's still treating me like a painting he acquired. Beautiful, valuable, something to display at the right events. Have you told him any of this? How do you tell someone they make you feel invisible without making them defensive, without turning it into a fight about who's the better victim?" She turned to look at Caleb. "I've tried. He doesn't hear me. Or he hears me but doesn't understand. To Wesley, problems are things you solve with money or strategy. He can't comprehend that some problems don't have solutions, only feelings that need to be felt. So leave him. And go where, do what I've been. Mrs. Wesley Hart for 8 years. I don't know who I am without that title. I don't have a career, don't have money of my own. I signed a prenup that basically says if I leave, I get nothing. I'd be starting over at 31 with no skills except looking good at fundraisers. You could paint, like your father." Lillian smiled sadly. "I haven't painted in years. Not since we got married. Wesley said it was a nice hobby, but not something to take seriously. I listened because I thought he knew better than me. Thought his success meant he understood how the world worked. Do you have any of your paintings?" "One, in the empty nursery." The woman at the window. I painted it the week after our honeymoon. It's the last honest thing I made before I started pretending to be someone I'm not. Caleb wanted to tell her she could start over, could reclaim the person she was before Wesley, but he knew it wasn't that simple. Money created gravity. Marriage created obligations. And leaving took more courage than staying, even when staying was killing you slowly. "Why did you give me your number?" he asked. "Because when I met you and Mia, I saw something I'd forgotten existed. A real family. Not a performance of family for people who don't actually know you. Real mess and real laughter and real love. You don't know me. I know you read your daughter 3 bedtime stories when you're tired because she asked nicely. I know you work a job you're overqualified for because it has good insurance and lets you leave by 5:30 for pickup. I know you look at me like I'm a person instead of an acquisition. How do you know about the bedtime stories?" Mia told me. "While we were chasing fireflies. She said you always read extra when you're sad because books make everything better." Caleb felt something crack in his chest. His daughter saw more than he gave her credit for. "I want to feel alive," Lillian said. "Just once. I want to wake up and feel something other than the weight of performing the right version of myself. Is that so terrible?" "No, but it can't be with me. Not while you're wearing his ring." She looked down at her left hand where a diamond caught the museum light and threw tiny rainbows across her palm. The ring was beautiful and expensive and meant nothing except ownership. "What if I take it off?" "Don't." His voice was hard. "Don't do that. Don't make this about me. Leave because you need to leave. Find yourself again because you deserve to know who you are. But don't leave for me because that puts a weight on this thing between us that it can't carry." "There's a thing between us then. You know there is." She reached over and took his hand, laced her fingers through his. Her palm was warm and fit perfectly, and this was the most intimate thing Caleb had done with another person since Emma left, and it was just holding hands on a museum bench. "If I leave him properly," she said quietly, "if I do it the right way. File for divorce. Move out. Take time to figure out who I am without being someone's wife. Would you wait?" Caleb's heart hammered. "That's a hell of a question. I know. But I need to know if there's something to wait for. If this thing between us is real or just 2 lonely people mistaking recognition for connection." He thought about Mia, about the kind of man he wanted to be for her, about teaching her through his actions that you don't cheat, you don't lie, you don't destroy marriages for attraction that might be love or might just be the shiny appeal of something forbidden. "I'll wait," he said. "But only if you do it right. No sneaking around, no being the reason. Clean break, honest conversations. Tell Wesley the truth." "What truth?" "That you're unhappy. That you married him for the wrong reasons. That you need to find out who you are. Don't mention me. Don't make this about another man. Make it about you choosing yourself. And if it takes months, then it takes months. And if you meet someone else while I'm figuring myself out." Caleb squeezed her hand. "I've been alone for 3 years. I can wait a little longer for something real." She lifted his hand and kissed his knuckles. It was gentle and sad, and felt like a promise neither of them was sure they could keep. They sat there for a long time holding hands in front of a painting of a woman waiting, while the museum moved around them and the world kept turning, and everything felt suspended between what was and what might be. They left separately, 15 minutes apart. Caleb walked out first, hands in his pockets, not looking back. He got to his car and sat in the parking lot and thought about what he'd just committed to. Waiting for a married woman to leave her husband, hoping she'd choose loneliness over security, believing that something that started with a note that said he can never know could somehow become honest. His phone buzzed. A text from Lillian. "Thank you for seeing me. The real me." He typed back, "Thank you for being brave enough to show her." Then he drove back to the office where Jordan took one look at his face and shook his head. You did something stupid, didn't you? Maybe. Or maybe I did something right. I'm not sure yet. That night, Caleb picked up Mia, and they got ice cream and went to the park. She told him about a boy in her class who ate glue and how her teacher said that was not appropriate snack behavior. She asked if they could get a dog. She fell asleep in the car on the way home with chocolate ice cream on her chin and complete faith that her father had everything under control. He carried her inside and thought about the weight of being someone's hero. How Mia believed he was good because she didn't know about notes in wallets and hands held in museums and the way he looked at another man's wife. She loved him without conditions, and he wanted to deserve that love. 3 days later, his phone rang at 7 a.m. Wesley, can you come in early? Need to talk. Caleb's blood went cold. Sure, everything okay? Wesley's voice sounded tired. Just need advice. See you at 7. Caleb stood in his small kitchen, coffee going cold in his hand, and knew with absolute certainty that everything was about to fall apart. Wesley knew. Someone had seen them at the museum. Security cameras. A colleague. It didn't matter. The point was the secret was out and his career was over, and Mia's hero father was about to become the cautionary tale about men who made stupid choices. He got to the office at 6:45. Made coffee he couldn't drink. Sat at his desk and waited for his life to end. Wesley arrived at 7 exactly. He looked like hell. Eyes red, tie askew. The careful polish gone. Sit down, Caleb. We need to talk about my wife. This was it. The moment when everything Caleb had built came crashing down. His career. His reputation. The way Mia looked at him like he hung the moon. All of it about to shatter because he'd held hands with a married woman in a museum and convinced himself it was different than what it actually was. Wesley closed the office door, sat down in the chair across from Caleb's desk instead of asking Caleb to come to his office. That felt significant somehow, like Wesley wanted neutral ground for whatever was about to happen. I found something, Wesley said. His voice was flat, tired. In Lillian's desk, a letter. Caleb's heart stopped. He forced himself to breathe normally, to look confused instead of terrified. Okay. Wesley pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. Set it on the desk between them like evidence in a trial. It's not addressed to anyone, no name, but it's clearly meant for someone who isn't me. He slid the letter across the desk. Caleb's hand shook slightly when he picked it up. He recognized Lillian's handwriting before he read a single word. The same neat script from the note in his wallet. The note that said he can never know. He unfolded it slowly, buying time, trying to prepare for whatever confession was written there. Trying to figure out if his name was mentioned. If there was anything that would connect him directly to this disaster. The letter was 2 pages. Handwritten. No date. No signature, just words that felt like they'd been ripped from somewhere deep and painful. I don't know if I'll ever send this. I don't even know who I'm writing to. Maybe I'm writing to the person I wish I could be, or the person I used to be before I learned to perform the right version of myself. You made me feel seen. For the first time in 8 years, someone looked at me and saw a person instead of a trophy. Not Wesley's wife. Not the woman who looks good at fundraisers. Just me, Lillian, the girl who used to paint and believe in things and feel alive. I don't know if this makes me terrible or just human. I don't know if wanting more than what I have makes me ungrateful or brave. But I know that when I'm with you, I remember what hope feels like, what possibility tastes like, what it means to be chosen for who I am instead of what I represent. I choose you. I choose feeling alive. I choose truth even if it ruins me. If I'm brave enough to send this, you'll know who I am, and maybe you'll choose me back. Caleb read it twice. His chest felt tight. The letter didn't name him, didn't give specifics, could have been written to anyone. But he knew it was meant for him the way you know your own heartbeat. He folded it carefully and set it back on the desk. Wesley watched him with eyes that looked like they hadn't slept. "What do you think?" Wesley asked. Caleb chose his words carefully. "I think your wife is unhappy. That much I got." Wesley laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What I can't figure out is who she wrote it to. I've been going through our calendar, our credit card statements, trying to find evidence of an affair. But there's nothing. No unexplained absences, no hotel charges, no delete messages, just this letter that sounds like she's in love with someone who isn't me. Maybe she hasn't acted on it yet." "Yet?" Wesley latched onto the word. "So you think there is someone?" "I think there's someone she wishes existed. Or someone she met briefly who reminded her of who she used to be before marriage changed her." "That's very diplomatic. You asked what I think." Wesley stood and walked to the window, looked out at Charlotte waking up below them. The sun was rising, painting everything gold, and Caleb thought about how beautiful mornings could be when your life wasn't falling apart. "Do you think I'm a good husband?" Wesley asked, without turning around. The question hung in the air like smoke. Caleb could lie. Could give the easy answer that preserved his job and his secret. Could say, "Of course, you provide well, you're successful." What more could anyone want? But lying felt worse than the truth. And maybe Wesley deserved honesty from someone, even if that someone was sleeping with his wife in potential, if not yet in practice. "I think you're a good provider," Caleb said carefully. "A good businessman. But I think you treat your marriage like an acquisition, something to optimize and manage rather than something to feel." Wesley turned around. His expression was hard to read. "Go on. When's the last time you asked Lillian what she wants? Not what looks good for your image or what makes sense strategically. What she actually wants. What makes her happy. I give her everything. The house, the cars. Unlimited budget for whatever she needs. Those are things. I'm asking about her. Who is she? What does she care about? What does she dream about when she's alone?" Wesley was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. Have you ever asked?" Another silence, this one heavier. "No. I assumed if she needed something, she'd tell me. Maybe she doesn't know how to tell you. Maybe the gap between what you think the marriage is and what it actually feels like to her is so wide she doesn't know where to start." Wesley sat back down, looked older suddenly. The polish and confidence stripped away, leaving just a tired man who'd built a perfect life and missed the point entirely. "I love her," he said quietly. "I know that sounds hollow given what you just said, but I do. I just thought love meant providing, protecting, building a life that looked successful. Love also means seeing someone, really seeing them, asking the hard questions, being willing to hear answers that might hurt. Like what? Like maybe she married you for the wrong reasons. Like maybe she spent 8 years trying to be grateful instead of happy. Like maybe this letter isn't about another man. It's about her finally admitting she's drowning." Wesley's jaw tightened. "You seem very certain about what my wife is feeling." Caleb's heart hammered, but he kept his voice steady. "I'm not certain about anything. I'm just telling you what I see from the outside. You asked my opinion. I'm giving it. And what would you do if you were me? I'd talk to her, really talk. Not about who the letter is for or whether she's cheating. About whether she's happy. About what she needs. About whether this marriage is something you both want or something you're both performing. What if she says she wants out? Then you let her go. Because keeping someone who doesn't want to be kept isn't love. It's possession." The words landed hard. Wesley flinched like he'd been hit. They sat in silence while the office filled with morning light and people started arriving for work. Voices in the hallway. Phones ringing. The normal sounds of a day that felt anything but normal. "Thank you for being honest," Wesley said finally. "Most people won't tell me hard truths. They tell me what they think I want to hear." "You asked," I answered. "Can I tell you something?" Wesley looked at Caleb with an expression that was almost vulnerable. "I think I married a painting too. I saw this beautiful woman with her dying father and her struggling gallery, and I thought I could save her. Be the hero. Never occurred to me to ask if she wanted to be saved, or if she just wanted someone to see her as more than a project. It's not too late to start, isn't it? We've been married 8 years. That's a lot of missed opportunities, or it's the foundation for a real conversation. You can't fix the past, but you can be honest about the present. Wesley nodded slowly, stood, picked up the letter and folded it carefully, put it back in his pocket like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I'm going home early today, going to talk to Lillian. Really talk. He paused at the door. If this ends badly, I want you to know it's not your fault. You told me what I needed to hear, even though it wasn't easy. After Wesley left, Caleb sat at his desk and tried to process what had just happened. He'd given marriage counseling to the husband of the woman he was falling for. Had been honest in a way that might end their marriage. Had told Wesley to let Lillian go if that's what she wanted. The irony was almost funny. Almost. Jordan appeared in his doorway 10 minutes later with coffee and concern written all over his face. You're still employed, apparently. What happened? Wesley found a letter from Lillian. Wanted advice. Jesus. Jordan sat down. Did he know it was about you? Wasn't about me. Not by name. Just about being unhappy. Brother, that's the same thing. Maybe. Caleb took the coffee. Drank it even though it was too hot. I told him to talk to her. Ask her what she needs. Let her go if that's what she wants. You told your boss to let his wife leave him. I told him to be honest. There's a difference. Jordan shook his head. You're either the most ethical person I know or the stupidest. I haven't decided which. Can't it be both? The rest of the day blurred. Caleb went through meetings and emails and pretended to care about market projections while his phone sat silent in his pocket. No text from Lillian, no call from Wesley, just silence that felt like waiting for a bomb to drop. He picked up Mia at 5:30. She chattered about her day, and he tried to focus, but his mind was in a house across town where conversation was happening that would determine everything, whether Lillian would stay, whether she'd leave, whether any of this had been real or just two lonely people mistaking desperation for connection. After Mia was asleep, his phone finally buzzed. Lillian. Can you talk? He stepped onto his small balcony where the city lights blurred together and the night air was cool against his skin. What happened? We talked, really talked. For the first time since before we got married, maybe. Her voice was shaking. He asked me if I was happy. I told him the truth, which is that I married him for the wrong reasons. That I've spent 8 years being grateful instead of happy. That I'm drowning in a life that looks perfect but feels empty. What did he say? He cried. I've never seen him cry. Not at our wedding, not when his father died, not once in 8 years. But tonight he cried and said he was sorry, that he'd treated me like an acquisition instead of a person, that he understood if I needed to leave. Are you leaving? Yes. The word came out like a confession. I'm filing for divorce, moving out, starting over. Caleb's heart hammered when, end of the week, my lawyer's drafting papers. Wesley isn't contesting. We're doing it amicably, quietly. He's letting me out of the prenup, giving me enough to start over. That's generous. He said he'd rather I left whole than stayed broken. Silence. Then I didn't tell him about you. Good, don't. But you're part of why I'm doing this. You made me remember what it feels like to be seen. No. Caleb's voice was firm. You're doing this for you, because you deserve better. I'm just the person who happened to be there when you realized it. Don't make this about me. What if I want it to be about you? Not yet. Not while you're still married. Not while you're still figuring out who you are without being someone's wife. Do this clean, Lillian. Leave because you need to leave. Find yourself. Then we'll see what this is. You're making me wait. I'm making us both wait. Because if we do this now, it'll always have a shadow over it. People will say you left Wesley for me. that we were cheating, that we destroyed a marriage. And maybe they'd be right. But if we wait, if we do this properly, then we're just two people who found each other after you were brave enough to choose yourself. How long? However long it takes. Months, maybe. You need time to breathe, to paint, to remember who Lillian is without Wesley's last name attached. What if you meet someone else? I won't. How do you know? Because I've been waiting 3 years for something that feels real. I can wait a little longer. She was crying. He could hear it in her breathing. Thank you for not making this easy. Easy would be wrong. When it's done, she said quietly, when the divorce is final and I've had time to find myself, can we try? Yes, but we do it right. No hiding, no shame, no wondering if we destroyed something to build this. Deal. They stayed on the phone in silence for a while, just breathing. Existing in the same moment, even though they were miles apart. Finally, Lillian spoke. I should go. Pack. Call my lawyer. Figure out where I'm going to live. Call me if you need anything, as a friend. As a friend, she repeated, for now. For now. After they hung up, Caleb stood on his balcony and watched the city breathe below him. Lights in windows. Lives being lived. People making choices that would ripple out in ways they couldn't predict. He thought about Mia asleep in her room, about the kind of man he wanted to be for her, about teaching her through his actions that you do the hard thing, even when the easy thing is right there in front of you. This was the hard thing. Waiting. Letting Lillian leave on her own terms for her own reasons. Not being the affair that destroyed a marriage, but the possibility that waited on the other side of someone choosing themselves. He went inside, checked on Mia, who was sprawled across her bed with her stuffed dragon clutched tight. He pulled the blanket over her and kissed her forehead and whispered that he was trying to be the person she thought he was. The next 3 weeks felt like holding his breath underwater. Lillian filed for divorce. Wesley signed the papers without contest. The company gossip mill churned with speculation about what happened, but nobody had facts, so the story stayed vague. Lillian moved out of the Blue Ridge house into a small apartment in Noda, the arts district. She texted Caleb the address with a note, small but mine. He didn't visit. They'd agreed. Clean break. Time apart. Let the divorce finalize. Let the dust settle. Do it right. But they texted. Small things. How her day was. What Mia said at dinner. Pictures of paintings she was starting again. Photos of Mia's latest school project. Fragments of lives lived separately but moving toward the same point. Wesley called Caleb into his office 4 weeks after the conversation about the letter. Wanted to thank you, Wesley said. For being honest, for not telling me what I wanted to hear. How are you doing? Better than I expected. Worse than I'd like. Wesley looked tired but clearer somehow. Like a weight had lifted. Lillian and I talked again last night. Really talked. She told me about her father. About feeling like she owed me her life. About never feeling like herself in our marriage. That must have been hard to hear. It was. But it was also true. And truth matters more than comfort. Wesley paused. She didn't mention anyone else. No other man. I think this really is about her finding herself. Caleb's chest tightened with something like guilt. I'm glad you two could end it honestly. Me too. Wesley stood and extended his hand. Thank you. For being a friend when I needed one. They shook hands, and Caleb felt like a fraud. He was giving marriage advice to a man whose wife he was waiting for. Being praised for honesty while hiding the biggest truth of all. But he'd kept his word. Hadn't seen Lillian. Hadn't pushed. Hadn't made himself the reason she left. That had to count for something. The divorce finalized on a Thursday in June. 3 months after the dinner. 2 months after the museum. Lillian texted a photo of the signed papers with one word done. Caleb stared at his phone. She was free now. Single. They could see each other without it being wrong. could start whatever this was properly. But he remembered his promise. Take time, he texted back. Find yourself. Paint. Breathe. I'll be here. Her response came 10 minutes later. You're infuriating. I know. But you're right. I need this. Need to remember who I am without being defined by someone else. So that's what they did. Waited. Separately. Lillian painted and went to therapy and slowly started building a life that belonged to her. Caleb worked and raised Mia and learned that waiting for the right thing was harder than running toward the wrong thing. They texted every day, called twice a week. Mia asked about the pretty lady, and Caleb said she was going through a hard time, but she was okay. Mia accepted this with 7-year-old wisdom and asked if they could send her cookies because cookies helped with hard times. So they did. Caleb and Mia baked chocolate chip cookies and sent them to Lillian's new address with a note from Mia that said, "Hope you're not too sad. Love, Mia and Dad." Lillian called crying. "These are perfect. Tell Mia, thank you. Tell her I miss her." 2 months after the divorce, Lillian called on a Sunday morning. Her voice was different. Lighter. "I painted something. Want to see? Now, if you're free." Caleb looked at Mia, who was watching cartoons in pajamas. "Wanted to go see Miss Lillian's apartment?" Mia's face lit up. The pretty lady, yes. They drove to Noda, and Caleb's heart hammered the whole way. This was the first time they'd see each other since everything changed. Since she'd left Wesley. Since the divorce. Since the waiting began. Lillian's apartment was small. Probably a quarter the size of the house she'd left. But it was full of life. Paintings leaning against walls, brushes in jars, colors everywhere. It looked like an artist lived there. It looked real. She opened the door in paint-stained jeans and a t-shirt with her hair pulled back and no makeup, and Caleb thought she'd never looked more beautiful. Mia ran in and hugged her immediately, and Lillian caught her and held on tight. And Caleb watched his daughter and this woman who'd been a stranger 4 months ago and felt something in his chest unlock. "I want to show you something," Lillian said to Mia. "Come and see what I've been working on." She led them to an easel in the corner where a painting was drying. It was the 3 of them, Caleb and Mia and Lillian in a garden full of fireflies. Not the perfect garden from the Hart House, a wild garden where things grew messy and real. "It's us," Mia breathed. "We're catching bugs." "You're the best bug catchers I know," Lillian said. After Mia wandered off to explore the apartment, Caleb and Lillian stood in front of the painting. Not touching, just close. "How do you feel?" he asked. Terrified, free, both. She turned to look at him. "Thank you for making me wait, for not letting this be easy. You needed time. We both did." She took his hand, laced her fingers through his like she had in the museum. But this time it didn't feel stolen. It felt earned. "Now what? Now we do it properly. Slow, honest. I want to earn this. Want to earn you. You already have." Mia's voice carried from the other room asking if she could have cookies for breakfast, and Lillian laughed that real laugh, and Caleb felt the last piece of his carefully controlled life settle into place. This was right. Not perfect, not easy, but right. Built on honesty and waiting and choosing each other only after Lillian had chosen herself first. They spent the day together. The 3 of them. Making breakfast in Lillian's tiny kitchen. Walking through the neighborhood. Sitting in a park while Mia played. Building something real instead of something rushed. When they left, Mia hugged Lillian goodbye and whispered, "Are you going to be my mom someday?" Lillian looked at Caleb over Mia's head, and he saw tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. "Would that be okay with you?" Lillian asked. Mia considered this seriously. "Only if you promise not to leave." "I promise. I won't leave to chase something else. This is where I want to be." "Cool. Also, I want a puppy." In the car on the way home, Mia fell asleep happy, and Caleb's phone buzzed with a text from Lillian. "Thank you for waiting for me. For making me be brave. for showing me what real love looks like." He typed back, "Thank you for being brave enough to find yourself, for choosing honestly over easily, for showing Mia what it looks like when someone refuses to settle." That night, after Mia was in bed, Caleb stood on his balcony and thought about choices. About the note he'd kept in his wallet for weeks. About hands held in museums. About waiting when everything in him wanted to run forward. They'd done it right. The hard way, the honest way. And now, finally, they could build something real. His phone rang. Wesley. Caleb almost didn't answer, but he did. "I heard Lillian's seeing someone," Wesley said. No anger in his voice, just curiosity. "She's finding herself," Caleb said carefully. "What she does now is her business. Is it you?" The question hung in the air. Caleb could lie, could deflect, but they'd come this far on honesty. Not yet, she needed time alone, to figure out who she is. But yes, eventually, if she'll have me. Wesley was quiet for a long moment. "You gave me good advice. About letting her go, about being honest. I want to return the favor." "Okay, don't waste it. What you have. The chance to do it right. Lillian deserves someone who sees her, who chooses her for who she is instead of what she represents. I think that might be you. Thank you. And, Caleb, take care of her. She's stronger than I ever gave her credit for. But she's also been hurt. Don't add to that." "I won't." After they hung up, Caleb thought about endings and beginnings, about how sometimes the right thing looked like the wrong thing until enough time passed to see it clearly. He pulled the note from his wallet, the one that said he can never know. He tore it into small pieces and threw it away because it didn't apply anymore. Wesley knew. Not the specifics, maybe. Not the museum or the garden or the moment when everything changed. But he knew enough. And he'd given his blessing in the only way a man could when his wife chose someone else. 3 months later, Lillian and Caleb. Caleb were officially together. 6 months later, she moved into his apartment and they started looking for something bigger. A year later, Mia asked the question again, but this time as a plan instead of a hope. This time, Lillian said yes. The first official date happened on a Saturday in September, 6 months after the divorce was finalized. Not at a fancy restaurant where people might see them and whisper. Not hidden away where it felt like something shameful. Just coffee at a place in Plaza Midwood where artists hung their work and the barista knew everyone's order. Lillian ordered a latte. Caleb got black coffee because he'd never developed taste for anything fancier. They sat across from each other at a small table by the window, and for the first few minutes neither knew what to say. All the texts and phone calls over the past months had been easy, but sitting across from each other in daylight officially dating felt different, more real, more fragile. "You're nervous," Lillian said. "Terrified," Caleb admitted. "Good, me too." They talked for 2 hours. About nothing important and everything important. She told him about the art class she'd started teaching at the community center. He told her about Mia's latest obsession with frogs and her insistence that they needed to build a pond in their apartment. They laughed about the absurdity of waiting this long to have coffee when they'd already decided they wanted to try building a life together. But the waiting mattered. They both knew it. The waiting had given Lillian time to paint again, to go to therapy and unpack 8 years of performing instead of living, to learn that she could pay her own bills and make her own choices and exist as a person instead of someone's wife. The waiting had given Caleb time to think about what he wanted. Not just escape from loneliness, not just someone to help raise Mia, but a real partner. Someone who chose him as much as he chose her. Someone who'd done the hard work of finding themselves before trying to build something with someone else. "When can I see Mia again?" Lillian asked as they walked to their cars. "She asks about you constantly. Wants to know when the pretty lady is coming back." Lillian smiled. "Next weekend, maybe we could go to the park. Feed the ducks like we talked about. She'd love that." And you, Caleb, stopped walking. turned to face her. The September sun caught her hair, and she looked nervous and hopeful and real. Me too. I'd love that too. She kissed him then. Their first real kiss. Not stolen in an office or almost happened in a garden. Just a kiss on a sidewalk in the middle of the day where anyone could see. It was soft and brief and tasted like coffee and possibility. I've been wanting to do that for months, she said when they pulled apart. Worth the wait. Absolutely. The next weekend, they went to Freedom Park. Mia brought old bread, even though Caleb had explained 17 times that bread wasn't good for ducks. Lillian bought proper duck food from the nature center. They compromised by letting Mia throw the good food while thinking it was the bread. Mia held Lillian's hand while they walked around the pond, chattered about school and her best friend Sophie, and how her teacher said they might get a class pet, but it probably wouldn't be a frog, which was disappointing, but she'd survive. Lillian listened like every word mattered, asked questions, laughed at the right moments. Caleb walked behind them and watched his daughter and this woman who'd been a stranger less than a year ago and felt something settle in his chest. This was what he'd been waiting for. Not perfection, not the absence of complications, just real connection. Honest love. The kind you built slowly instead of grabbed desperately. After the ducks, they got ice cream. Mia got chocolate with sprinkles and ate it too fast and got a brain freeze and declared it was worth it. Lillian got vanilla because she was boring, as Mia informed her. Caleb got mint chip and shared bites with both of them. They sat on a bench and watched people live their lives. Joggers, dog walkers. Other families doing the same simple Sunday afternoon ritual of being together without needing it to be special. Mia looked up at Lillian with her chocolate-covered face. "Are you my dad's girlfriend now?" "Yes," Lillian said, "if that's okay with you." Mia considered this seriously. She had a way of thinking about important questions that made her seem older than 7. "As long as you don't leave," she finally said. "Dad gets sad when people leave." Caleb's chest tightened. He'd thought he'd hidden it better. The aftermath of Emma. The quiet sadness of doing everything alone. Apparently his daughter saw more than he knew. Lillian knelt down so she was eye level with Mia. "I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. Life doesn't work that way. But I can promise I won't leave because I'm looking for something else. I already looked. This is what I want. You and your dad. This weird little family we're building. Even if we can't get a frog, even then." "Okay." Mia hugged her, getting chocolate on Lillian's shirt. She didn't seem to mind. They started slow. Dinner once a week. Park visits on weekends. Movie nights where Mia fell asleep on the couch between them. Building routines. Creating memories. Learning each other's rhythms. Lillian learned that Caleb couldn't function before coffee, and Mia was impossible to wake up on school days. That Thursday nights were for reading extra bedtime stories. That Caleb kept emergency granola bars in every jacket pocket because Mia's blood sugar dropped fast and turned her into a tiny monster. Caleb learned that Lillian painted when she was anxious, that she talked to herself while cooking, that she'd never learned to make grilled cheese without burning it and thought this was a personal failing worth apologizing for. That she cried at commercials about dogs, but stayed dry-eyed through actual sad movies. Mia learned that Lillian would read the same book 17 times without complaining. That she knew all the words to songs from musicals and would sing them while doing dishes. That she kept promises. That when she said she'd be there, she showed up. 3 months into dating, officially Caleb's apartment lease came up for renewal. He sat at his small kitchen table with the renewal notice and thought about the 800 square feet that had been enough when it was just him and Mia. But now there was Lillian. Now there were painting supplies in his living room and extra toothbrushes in the bathroom and a future that needed more space. He called her that night. "Want to look at apartments with me?" Silence on the other end. "Then together apartments like for both of us. Unless you want to keep paying for 2 places." More silence. He could hear her breathing. Could picture her in her small Noda apartment surrounded by paintings and possibility. "Yes," she finally said. "Yes, I want to look at apartments with you." They found a place in Plaza Midwood. 2 bedrooms because Mia needed her space and they needed theirs. Hardwood floors that Lillian loved. A small balcony that faced the city. Enough room for an easel in Mia's ever-growing collection of stuffed animals, and a kitchen table that could seat 4 because families grew and changed and you needed space for that. The lease required both their names, both their incomes, both their commitment to a future they were building together. Caleb signed his name and watched Lillian sign hers and felt the weight of it. The seriousness, the promise. Moving day was chaos. Mia ran between boxes giving unhelpful advice. Jordan showed up with pizza and a truck and commentary about how Caleb had finally gotten his life together. Lillian's friend from her art class brought wine and helped hang paintings. It was messy and exhausting and perfect. That night, after everything was unpacked enough to be livable after Mia was asleep in her new room with her stuffed dragon and most of her favorite books, Caleb and Lillian stood on the balcony and looked at Charlotte's lights spreading out below them. "We did it," Lillian said softly. "Did what? Built something real. Something honest. Something that doesn't have shadows over it." It was hard. The best things usually are. His phone rang. Wesley? Caleb hadn't talked to him in months. Not since the conversation about taking care of Lillian. He almost didn't answer, but Lillian nodded like she knew who it was and wanted him to. "Congratulations," Wesley said. "Heard you 2 moved in together. News travels fast. Charlotte's not that big." Wesley's voice was warm. No anger. No bitterness. Just genuine friendliness. "I wanted to say I'm happy for you. Both of you. Thank you. I mean it. I've been seeing someone too. Sarah. She works in nonprofit development. We met at a fundraiser and she called me out for talking too much about myself. It was refreshing. Sounds like a good match." "She is." Wesley paused. "Listen, I know this is weird, but I wanted to thank you. For the advice back then. For telling me hard truths when I needed them. For treating Lillian with respect even when you could have taken advantage. I wasn't going to be that person. I know. That's why I'm calling. Some men would have had an affair. Would have snuck around. Made it dirty. But you did it right. Made her leave on her own terms. Gave her time to find herself. That took character." Caleb didn't know what to say. Thanks felt inadequate. "Take care of her," Wesley said. "And tell Mia I said hello. She's a good kid, deserves a good family." After they hung up, Lillian came up behind Caleb and wrapped her arms around him. What did he say? That we did it right. That he's happy for us. "Are you okay?" "Yeah." Caleb turned to face her. "Yeah, I think I am. This whole thing could have been ugly. Could have destroyed people. But everyone chose honesty over easy and somehow we all came out better. Not everyone would have waited. I had to. For Mia. For you. For myself. I needed to know this was real, and not just 2 lonely people grabbing at each other because we were both drowning. And now I know. This is real. You're real. We're real." 6 months after moving in together, Mia asked the question at breakfast on a Sunday morning. They were making pancakes, the kitchen covered in flour. Lillian's attempt at flipping resulting in one on the floor that nobody mentioned. "Are you gonna marry her?" Mia asked Caleb directly. Lillian froze mid-flip. Caleb nearly dropped the syrup. "That's a big question," he said. "Sophie's mom is getting married again. Sophie says it's weird having 2 dads, but also she gets more presents on her birthday, so it evens out." "This isn't about presents," Caleb said. "I know." Mia was serious. "It's about whether Lillian is staying, because if she's staying forever, we should make it official. That's what Sophie says official means. Sophie is very wise. So, are you?" Caleb looked at Lillian, who was pretending to be very focused on pancakes, but he could see her hands shaking slightly. They hadn't talked about marriage. Hadn't even approached the subject. Both of them were gun-shy from previous failures. Both wanted to be sure. But watching Lillian in his kitchen teaching his daughter to flip pancakes badly wearing his old t-shirt and paint-stained sweatpants, he was sure. Had been sure for months. Maybe had been sure since that first handshake that lasted too long in Wesley's office. "Yeah," he said. "I'm gonna marry her, if she'll have me." Lillian turned around. Tears in her eyes. Pancake batter on her cheek. The most beautiful disaster he'd ever seen. "Was that a proposal?" she asked. "Worst one ever," Mia declared. "Sophie says there should be flowers and a ring, and you're supposed to get on one knee." "Mia's not wrong," Caleb admitted. "But yes, eventually. When I do it properly, will you say yes?" Lillian crossed the kitchen. Kissed him with Mia watching and giggling. "Yes. Whenever you ask properly, the answer is yes." "Cool," Mia said. "Also, we're definitely getting a dog now. Families have dogs." The proposal happened 2 months later. Nothing fancy. Just the three of them at Freedom Park where they'd had their first real family day. Caleb got on one knee by the duck pond. Mia held the ring box because she'd insisted on being part of it. Lillian cried and said yes before he finished asking. They got married at the courthouse 6 months later. A small ceremony. Just family and close friends. Jordan was best man. Mia was flower girl and took her job very seriously. Wesley sent a card with his congratulations and a painting for their apartment. A woman in a garden, but this time she wasn't alone. 1 year after the wedding, Caleb stood on their balcony late at night. Inside, Lillian was painting. Mia was asleep. A puppy named Frog, because Mia had gotten her way, eventually snored on the couch. Their life was messy and imperfect and real. His phone buzzed. A text from Lillian, even though she was 20 feet away. "Come see what I finished." He went inside. She'd been working on a large canvas for weeks. Wouldn't let anyone see it until it was done. Now it hung on the wall where she could step back and view it properly. It was their family. But not posed or perfect. It was them in their living room. Mia on the floor with art supplies spread everywhere. Caleb at the table with work papers and coffee. Lillian painting in the corner. The puppy destroying a shoe. Real life captured in oil and color. "What do you think?" she asked, nervously. "It's perfect. It's messy. That's what makes it perfect." She leaned into him and they stood there looking at the painting. At the representation of the life they'd built. Not easily. Not quickly. But honestly. The hard way. The right way. Mia appeared in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Can't sleep. Too excited about tomorrow." Tomorrow was Saturday. Park day. Their routine. The simple rhythm of being together without needing it to be more than that. "Come here," Lillian said, opening her arms. Mia crashed into them, and Caleb wrapped around both of them, and they stood in their messy apartment with their messy life, and he thought about how far they'd all come. From a note in a pocket to this. From loneliness to family. From secrets to honesty. From easy lies to hard truths. "You happy?" Lillian asked softly. "Yeah." Caleb kissed the top of her head. "Yeah, I really am." "Good," Mia said. "Because you're stuck with us now. Best thing I ever got stuck with." Later, after Mia was back in bed and the puppy was crated and Lillian had cleaned her brushes, they stood on the balcony again. Their spot. Where conversations happened and life got figured out one moment at a time. "Do you ever regret it?" Lillian asked. "How long it took. How hard we made it." "Never. If we'd rushed it, it would have had shadows. People would have said we destroyed a marriage, that we were cheaters, that it was built on lies. And now it's built on honesty, on choosing right over easy, on waiting until everyone was free and clear and ready. No shadows, no shame. Just us choosing each other after we'd both chosen ourselves first." She took his hand, laced her fingers through his like she had in the museum, like she had in the garden, But this time it wasn't stolen, it was theirs. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." Inside, Mia called out that Frog had escaped his crate and was eating her homework. Lillian laughed and went to handle the crisis. Caleb stayed on the balcony for one more moment, looking at Charlotte's lights, thinking about choices and consequences, and the strange path that led here. A note in his pocket. A whisper that said he can never know. A decision to wait, to do it right, to build something real instead of something rushed. It had been hard. It had taken months. It had required patience and honesty and choosing difficult over easy at every turn. But standing here now, listening to his wife laugh at their daughter and their ridiculous dog living in an apartment full of paintings and love and mess, he knew it had been worth it. Every hard choice. Every moment of waiting. Every time he'd chosen right over easy. All of it worth it. He went inside to help rescue homework from a puppy named Frog, and the door to the balcony stayed open behind him, letting in the Charlotte night air and the sound of a city breathing and the promise of tomorrow. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, built honestly, earned completely, loved fiercely, and that was more than enough.